Fast forwarding to the Sunday games, we don't have an international game, so no early game this week. We will have more international games later in the season, but not this week. Giants and the Eagles, they faced off, what was this, 2 weeks ago, right, on Thursday Night Football? And so they get this opponent pretty quickly once again here. The Giants were able to win that game in New York, and that was really when I think a lot of the questions started to, I guess I don't want to say started to come up with the Eagles, but the criticism started to hold weight, right? I think a lot of people look at the Eagles and they're like, they're not what they were last year, but they're still winning. So people still had them in, the top 5, the top 3 of power rankings. And then when that Thursday Night Football game happened, it's like the floodgates were open and everybody was very willing to drop them further down those top 10s. Now you get last week when Hurts was playing very well, especially throwing deep down the field against the Minnesota Vikings that we just talked about. This game's in Philly. You want to talk about the Eagles or the Giants here for this one?
Yeah, I think I kind of just want to recap what Jalen Hurts did last week and what the Eagles offense did this past week against Minnesota to have all that success you're talking about. And we're actually going to have a film breakdown coming out on this channel tomorrow about what the Eagles did right in that game, in their passing game against Minnesota. But the big things that you get are deep completions, 5 deep completions. They're hitting home runs in this offense in this game, at least against Minnesota. Can they keep that momentum going, getting A.J. Brown and getting Devontae Smith going in the passing game? 91.5 passing grade with motion for Jalen Hurts in that game, a season high. What you could tell was the motions that Kevin Patullo was putting in the passing games was just an ability to give Jalen Hurts to pre-snap read the defense, right? Man or zone, right? Just those little tells that you can get pre-snap so he knows what's coming. 42% of their plays, also a season-high run from under center. Add a little more deception, get Saquon Barkley going downhill a little bit in the run game. That combination of things really helps them. Look, they didn't run the ball as efficiently as they wanted to last week still, but I think the idea is there and getting better, and the idea that they're getting a little more creative with getting Brown and Smith those one-on-one matchups, that makes their offense a lot better. And for as many issues as they've had, Trev, you've mentioned it, they're still 5-2, right? And they're still a work in progress. And they did this last year. They started 2-2, and then they got red hot for the rest of the season. If their passing game looks more like it did last week, and obviously deep completions are kind of a high variance thing, right, when it comes to week-to-week predictability, but it's the idea that they're getting their best players going. They're getting in heavier personnel. They're really leaning into what they should be as an offense. I'm curious to see if they keep that momentum going.
Yeah, on the Giants side of things, you and I have talked quite a bit about this, how since Jackson Dart has been inserted into the lineup, they've leaned a lot more towards sort of that rushing offense that they had a lot of success with Brian Daboll there with Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley back in, what was that, 2022, 2023? Can't remember one of those years.
22, yeah.
But yeah, it's very similar to that. And specifically, I looked this up. The 3 highest graded rushing games that they have had so far this year, the Giants, have come in the 3 games where they have run the most RPO concepts, right? Where you have both Cam Scattaboo and Jackson Dart as threats to not just run the ball, but I guess keep it and pass it as well. Just that multifaceted, okay, who could be rushing it here or there? I think that extra degree of things to think about for the defense is making a big difference for what this team wants to do on the ground. Now, specifically, if you go back to that Thursday Night Football game, Jackson Dart had an 83.5 rushing grade when scrambling, Dalton, and he had 5 scrambles in this game. That first one was for a touchdown, and the rest of them were for really effective. Clearly, that you see in the rushing game there. And surprisingly enough, the Eagles, for as much team speed as they have and as good as Zach Bond is in the middle of the defense as a linebacker, specifically, this team has a 51.8 defense grade against scrambles, against quarterback scrambling. That's their linebackers do, the Eagles linebackers. And they're 28th in EPA per play allowed when it comes to quarterbacks scrambling. So they're not giving up the most yards or the most touchdowns when it comes to scrambles, but they are seeming to give up those first downs. And they are those situations where they really need to get a stop on the quarterback. They're losing contain. They're not handling it well. I think that Vic Fangio is that type of defensive coordinator who he sees that, he knows that. That's going to be a major point of emphasis in this game. And I do think that the Eagles will get it right here. I still think this is going to be somewhat competitive, but the line being a touchdown at 7.5 as it is right now as we're recording this on a Wednesday, I have it right around that mark. I have the Eagles winning this game 24-17. I don't think it'll be a blowout or anything, but I do think Philly gets back to sort of basics in some of the mistakes that they made containing Jackson Dart and containing the run game that failed them last Thursday or the Thursday before when they faced off against Philadelphia. So I think the Eagles win this one at home.
I agree. I think a big factor is Fangio and that defense seeing the Giants for a second time, especially so soon, right? Last time I've been talking about how the Giants, even in their design run game, have gone to more gap scheme runs and power and pin pull and all those things that have made it a little bit easier for their offensive line to get to the second level. I think you're right about the linebackers. Jahad Campbell, Zach Baugh, Nakobe Dean is back healthy now. I think you look at those guys in the spotlight going, okay, they're going to learn lessons from the film in the first time, because the Giants were just a half step ahead of them in the run game, especially I thought by design. So I've got the Eagles 28-20. I do think that is right about the right spread for me as well. And I think the big thing is the Giants with Jackson Dart in there, they're just a better team than they were the first couple weeks of the season, right? It's clear the energy is there. Dart, Scadaboo, you can only imagine what they'd look like if they had Malik Neighbors healthy. But I think the fact that the Eagles get to see him a second time, they're at home, and hopefully they've figured out this offense, passing-wise, what they want to do, and that Minnesota game is the start of a trend for them. I think that makes a difference. I think they play much better than they did the first time in this game.
As Walt often says in the chat when we do these shows, make no mistake, Vic Fangio matters. And I actually do think that it will matter a lot, especially with the rematch coming so close to when the first game was. I think the Eagles are going to correct those things and bounce back, although I do think the Giants are certainly going to give it their best shot to keep the Eagles on their toes a little bit, right? They're going to rush the ball with that two-headed rushing attack. Now they got Tyrone Tracy back in the fold as well. And so they're going to give it their best, and I do think they're going to be effective. But it's those chunk plays, those big difference-making plays where you really fail to contain the quarterback and Jackson Dart specifically last time around that I think is going to be fixed this time around. I even wonder if, hey, we know the team speed or the player speed of Andrew Makuba. I wonder if Makuba actually gets involved with being more at the second level to contain Jackson Dart because of how fast he plays and how fast he can close in on the ball carrier. I wonder if we get a little bit of that mixed in.